God's upside-down kingdom. So there's repetition and going at it, and you know, it's like Jesus is wanting to shape us and mold us in a new way. And he molds us, and he was molding them that day with an additional story, a parable. He was shaking up their world and pulling out their foundations as he was sitting around that table. And he says to them around that table that day in verse 12, then Jesus said to his host, see, he turned to the most prominent person in the room, the one who probably was dressed all with all the regalia and looked important. And he said, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Here Jesus confronts the very thing they're sitting around the table and doing. He was reshaping their imagination. He confronts a payback system that was very prominent in the time. He says, those who sit together or fit in the right categories, they eat together. They're the ones who have the right to be invited to parties. The rich with rich, the poor with the poor, the middle with the middle, and everything else with everything else, whatever category they fit in. This was very, very common in the time. That was standard practice. And it was part of village life. You have to imagine when Jesus was sitting around this table, it wasn't like he was talking about telling the rich man to invite some anonymous poor person across the street or across town or in a different part of town. This was a small village. They knew who the poor people were. They knew them by name. They knew each other. They passed each other in the streets, and they ignored each other. And he says to them, invite people who cannot repay you. Expect no return payment. He was establishing new upside-down rules. He was establishing a new way of thinking that Jesus wants us to understand. And as we move into this, I think Greg has some really good insights to help us see what this looks like.
You've been so complimentary to me this morning.
Well, you know, you are famous.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. Those flattering words will get you nowhere. You know, this is kind of what's good about having people from different perspectives. A farm boy from Texas who can use analogies that I never would have thought of. Did you know that cows rate each other? I mean, it's kind of like, you know, they come in, oh, that's a 3, that's a 10, and then they fight each other. They put up their dukes. I didn't know that. Cows are sinful. They need to repent, obviously. And it occurred to me that that when cows fight, there's always a lot at stake. Sorry, I apologize. I'm not going to milk that analogy anymore. It's utterly ridiculous. Okay, whoa. All right, okay. Moving on. Hey, there's a person here, I don't know where you are, and I forget your first name, but you're from Ireland. Raise your hand from Ireland. Where are you? There you are, sister from Ireland. What is your name? Margaret from Ireland. Everyone say hi to Margaret from Ireland. It's me hometown there. We got a bonding, you know, because I'm Irish, at least part Irish. It's the part I'm most proud of. Arr. It's me Lucky Charms. Well, Margaret, it's good to have you here. I met Margaret a couple of years ago. I was over in Ireland, and it's a long story, but she ends up over here doing a week of training, and it's good to have you here. She gets the commuter award this morning. Way to go. Now, when I thought of that, because when I was in Ireland, it was about 2-3 years ago, I guess, there's a person who was visiting that church who was an American, and they were just over in Ireland for a little bit. And they came up to me, and they were like, you know, asking me questions about where I lived in the States and whatever. They actually visited Minnesota. And they asked me, do you know anybody by the name of, and I forget what the name was, something like Johnson or Anderson in the Twin Cities? It's like, probably not. You know, it's kind of a big place. But here's the thing. If you've ever traveled to a foreign country or something, you know this reality, where if you find another American, and you notice the way they talk or the way they dress or something, and you introduce yourself, and it turns out they're from America. And you're in a country where maybe you don't speak the language, even though in Ireland they do speak English, obviously, but with a cool accent. And you don't know the culture or whatnot, you're a little bit alienated, and that creates an immediate bonding with a person from your country. It's like, oh, here's a person like me who understands me, speaks my way, knows my customs. There's a kind of a bonding that goes on there. There's something about human nature that just does that naturally. We feel most secure when we're around familiarity. We gravitate towards people who are like us, who look like us, talk like us, think like us, act like us. We create friendships on that basis. And in those friendships, there's always kind of a mutual beneficial system. We could call it a payback system, a quid pro quo system. It's not a legality thing like you owe me because I did something for you. That's not a friendship, that's a deal. But in friendships, you bring something to the table that blesses them, and they bring something to the table that blesses you, and there's sort of a payback system. And it's almost always with people that we're familiar with, that are like us, that we easily understand, our preferred social group. Kind of human nature. It's why we are so segregated. We tend to group according to people that are like us, according to either race or culture, language, religious beliefs, socioeconomic status. Those are the people that we just understand most easily. And so those are the people we invite over when we're going to have a party. There's a premise that we all share. Jesus in this passage calls that whole thing into question. I don't think he's saying it's wrong to ever have parties with friends. I don't think he's saying that. He's not saying it's wrong to hang out with people that are like you. He did some of that. But he's certainly saying that if we're going to live in the kingdom and manifest the kingdom, we can't be defined by that. That's normal human behavior, yes, to gravitate towards the familiar and hang out with your preferred social group. That's normal, but we are not to be tyrannized by the normal. We're supposed to be unusual. We're supposed to be oddballs for Jesus, who swim upstream in a lot of ways. And so, in contrast to the normal of society, we're to have a heart and a mind that goes beyond our normal to manifest the kingdom beautiful. And the kingdom beautiful is about noticing people that are off of everyone's radar screen and purposely inviting folks in on your life who maybe don't look like you and don't think like you and are maybe very different from you. They're outside of your preferred social group. Maybe they're outside of your normal. Maybe they're outside of everybody's normal. And maybe they're off of everyone else's radar screen, but kingdom people are called to notice them and invite them in on their life. That's why Jesus says when you throw a party, do it a little bit different. Don't invite your friends that are going to repay you. They'll invite you over, and that goes round and round and round. Once in a while, that's good to do with friends, but rather to manifest the kingdom, invite over those who are poor, who can't repay you, and the disabled who can't repay you. In the first century, being disabled and poor and being a beggar and a marginalized person was one and the same thing. Invite the folks who are different from your rich neighbors. Reach out, include those other folks. That manifests the kingdom. Now, there's two ways I think we could really seriously misunderstand this passage. One would be to think that Jesus is telling us to be occasional good deed doers. That we are he's speaking to those who are privileged, and many of us are, who have the wealth and the able bodies, and if we're not careful, we could understand Jesus to be saying this: once in a while, throw a crumb their way. You who have so much, just bless those other people. It's a unilateral movement from me to them. I have arrived to share my abundance with you today because I am a nice person. It's a unilateral thing. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that, you'll maybe take what's being handed out because you are a person in need and they have stuff that you need. But it comes across as patronizing and belittling and even dehumanizing. A lot of Christians and a lot of churches have this mindset where they declare, today we're going to go down to the inner city and we're going to clean up their park, or we're going to come in and we're going to share our money with you so you can do this or whatever. And that's not bad in and of itself, and Lord knows the people mean well, but if it's a one-way street, it comes across as patronizing. I want us to notice that in this passage, Jesus does not say that we're to invite them, the outsiders, the people off the radar screen, the poor and the disabled. We're not to invite them to our festival for their sake, to bless them. He doesn't say, will you go out and bless those people? Now, they are blessed because they get a free meal out of the deal and some fellowship. But Jesus says, do this not for their sake, but for your sake, so you will be blessed. It's not so much that they need you, but you, disciples, you need them. You need them because otherwise you're going to be locked into your normal, and then your normal is not the kingdom. It doesn't manifest the kingdom. You need them. to include them in on your life, to